Forgot to add us to the stage. How you doing, everybody? This is John, and welcome to. It's not It's Clobbering Time, and it's not regular John's Long Black. This is Comic Book Team Up. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. How's everybody doing? This is where RJ and we go on each other's channels and just talk comics. We don't necessarily have a guest today, but if people pop up in the chat, we might send a link out to people. That was fun when Michael Bancroft came in. So how you doing, RJ?
I'm doing good. I was just watching our two trailers, and I think you couldn't find two trailers that were more diametrically opposed to each other. Yours is upbeat and, all superhero, blue sky. Mine's black and white, just sad music, guy walking down with a body in his hand.
Yeah. It takes all types, right? What does it say? It's a melting pot over here. Yeah, so we might as well. My comic is obvious. It's a traditional love letter to a traditional Bronze Age Marvel comics. Like the whole conceit of my comic is, let's pretend that Avengers 157 is on the shelf, and then right next to it is Chris Claremont, John Byrne's X-Men, and right next to it is Walt Simonson's Thor, and right next to it is Heroic Tales. Where would your comic fit in?
Where would my comic fit in? It would probably be behind what's its name? The Samurai and Cub. What was it? Ronin?
Lone Wolf and Cub?
Cub. It would be behind that, as it would be.
Well, yeah, your comic is it's black and white with blue. So we look at my shelf. There's all the Marvels over there. Then we go over here to the DC. Then we got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We got Love and Rockets and Fade to Blue.
I got to say, the reason why I came up with this to begin with was because this guy, artist, came to me and said, "You want to do some work together?" And I said, "Yes." Your stuff, your black and white stuff is beautiful. I came up with a story just for him, so his art could shine. Really? Yep.
Oh, I'm glad you said that, because I made one comic book, so I don't consider myself a successful comic book person yet. That's for you guys to decide. But I had a bunch of artists reach out and say, I like you, I like your channel, I like what you're doing. Do you want to work together? And I said, well, I would love to, but I could barely afford the one comic that I'm making. So we beat around the bush, hemmed and hawed, came up with an equitable deal. And I sent out scripts to a bunch of people. And it's funny because as I wrote this one script, I got a story that would fit your style. I don't know if you know Stippling Vaughn.
No,
he does this beautiful stippling, like classic artist. So I was like, I have a story set in Revolutionary War America, a character called the Printer's Devil. He's an apprentice printer that I'm not going to give away the story, but he was tasked with printing an important document, and that important document got taken away. So he's just like, my livelihood's going to be just ruined if this gets out. So he puts on a mask. He's all covered with ink, so he's this dirty little, domino mask, and he goes out to recover this document, because if he fails, he doesn't care about America. I mean, he does care, but he's not thinking about the grand philosophy of the American dream. He's thinking, I'm not going to have a job, and then the girl that I love is going to move on and marry somebody else. So he's thinking with his hormones. I just think it's funny, but it's set in Revolutionary War America, and this guy, I saw his artwork in my story before he even asked if we could work together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and then there's DC Miller. He sent me some fan drawings of my comic books of my characters, but in a goofy anime style. So he said, yeah, let's work. So I sent him a story, and it's funny because that story was drawn by him before he even asked me if that, so that, just put your stuff out there. You a guy comes up to you who's suited to you, and now you're making a real upbeat, blue sky, happy-go-lucky guy walking down the street with a corpse in his hand. It all works out.
I always show this image here. I'll see if it'll upload. I don't know. I'm trying to present it, but
oh yeah, this is beautiful. This is beautiful.
That's the essence of this book right here. It's supernatural that Well, basically, film noir and Indiana Jones is what I always say. It's you got that hint of it supernatural there that's never explained, but you also got the black and white of the film noir. It's set in 1929, 1930.
And
So
it's set in the Thomas Valiant world,
yes,
right?
just back in time.
Just back in time. Yeah. So is it safe to say that all of your comics are going to be set in the same universe?
Oh yeah, definitely. Crom the Destroyer is basically 10,000 BC, and then you got this is the 1930s. The Artemis that I'm doing, which is the manga, is just set in Japan. It's probably a couple of years before Thomas Valiant, and then you got Thomas Valiant, and I also have a an offshoot of Thomas Valiant that I want to do with someone. I haven't got it nailed down yet, which would be set in the probably early 1920s, 1918.
Oh, cool. I love. Now that we're talking about this, I'm doing a period piece set in Revolutionary War. It's after the Revolutionary War, but before the Constitutional Convention. Man, is it rough? I'm like second guessing every word that I write. I'm like, they don't have McDonald's back then, right? So I can't, they have to go to a different restaurant. Like they don't have motor car. You know what I mean? Like I'm exaggerating for comedy purposes, but like so now I've just said I'm going to write the script and get the story done because I want to get it to Vaughn this week, and then like any anachronisms will deal as they show up. But like you're setting this in the 20s, so obviously no cell phones. Like, are you doing a lot of research about like, oh geez, this can't happen? This word doesn't even exist yet.
Yes and no. Basically, chapter 2 of what is it? Book 2, chapter 2 was set in a store, and I had to, Google and do some research on what does the store look like in 1929, right? What does grocery store look like in 1929? And I had to give that to my artists, stuff like that. Right now, book 3 is set in Chicago, 1930. So you got period clothes and you got mobsters and all that kind of stuff going on in the background, and it's like I'm pulling out black and white photos from buildings saying use the Treasury building as your main source for what this setting is for all this. So yeah, I give my artist a lot of detail. Like when I gave him the pictures of St. Patrick's in New York for book 1, he just nailed it.
Yeah, you showed that picture. That's a real beautiful piece of art that I really like that. Like I'm having real difficult time with the dialogue. Dialogue is the hardest part, if you ask me. Like I got the stories, I got the settings and all that stuff, but even in my last comic, regular set now, I had to like, is this how humans talk? Like I could talk to you obviously, but writing it down is different. Like you got to develop an ear. So I've just decided I'm just going to write the dialogue, get the art, and then work on the dialogue to make it sound, because it doesn't. They're saying the same thing. What are you doing that? Why are you taking that for? I'm in love with this girl. Like humans don't change that much in a couple of 100 years. You know what I mean? They're still going to have the same motivations. They're still going to get angry at the same stuff. So I feel I could write the story, but when it's time to do the lettering, I'm really going to struggle with age appropriate, not age like in maturity wise. I'm talking about like, vernacular for the time.
Yeah, I was talking about that, I think last week. I don't know if it was when we're on the air or not, but it's I was going to use anachronisms for a lot of stuff, and I thought to myself, is On the Level a something I can use from 1929, which I had to go look it up, right? And
Yeah,
it is.
it
And
is.
I went back to a lot of this stuff, although there's a guy one of the main characters in book 2, he's an old Irish guy, but I base him on a guy I knew.
Did Irish people exist back then in the 20s?
It's my best friend's father growing, well, actually when I was in university, he was straight from Ireland, and he would just he had a thick accent. So I just that's my 1930s guy, right there. You go, just using whatever he says.
Yeah, I got to remember how my grandmother talked. She was Irish, spoke Gaelic and everything. At least she told us she spoke Gaelic. I couldn't correct her. She could have been talking as far as I have a story set in late 60s Kingston, Jamaica. And in case you didn't know, I'm probably as far from a person who would be living in 1960s Kingston, Jamaica. But one of my partners at work he grew up in that exact time period, and he's been giving me dialogue and what's the word, idioms, expressions, and words that they used. There's a specific word that's missing. Like there's a song where he says, "Walking down the road with a ratchet in your waist, Johnny, you're too bad." And I'm like, what's he talking about, a ratchet? And he explained it was like almost like a big switchblade, a knife that the tough guys used back then, and you flicked them out, and like with a minimum of motion, a big, almost like a machete-sized blade would come out, and that's what that was the fashionable. I wouldn't have known that, It was so. And now he's a preacher here in Queens, That's his nickname at work, preacher. And he's always like, "Oh, you got to come down and get the good food in Jamaica." He owns a restaurant and a church, and he's an electrician. Very interesting guy. So I got to take him up on it, and I'm going to give him the script when I'm done and have him go over it, to make the dialogue sound authentic. So that's what you got to do, I guess.
No, definitely. There's research involved if you're going to go into the past or into a different place, but you can only go so far.
Yeah, there's a point where you gotta leave it alone. You can torture, and that's what I'm doing. Stippling is waiting for the script, and I'm torturing myself. And then on the plus side, I made a silly comic. It's set in a comic book that the Patriarch's children would read, and it's supposed to be perfect. It's kind of a spoof on Silver Age DC. That script I wrote like so fast because like I didn't have to worry about inaccuracies. Did you think Gardner Fox cared, about inaccuracies or people of various places speaking properly? Like, no, he didn't. So that I was like, oh, this was fun. This was like a nice little distraction from like more serious comic books, so that was fun. And let's see who's in the chat. We got Marcus over here. Marcus, you got to grow back that mustache. Especially when we promote our comic. I want to see the mustache. Devil Flyer Momentum, how you doing? How's your comic coming along? And I know I always pronounce your name wrong. Ula Femme. Hi, everybody. And so Fade to Blue. You this is still a mail order, right? It's not live yet, right?
No, it's not live yet. I'm still just collecting signatures right now. I was going to put it out before book 3 was ready because they're basically 24-page books. But we're so close to the end of book 3 that I say, let's finish it first.
Okay. Oh, cool. Could people still order the Valiant Heroes?
Yeah, you can still order the Valiant Heroes. We're having trouble with the Crom the Destroyer site right now just because Stripe is being uppity. But anyways.
Oh, that's Stripe. Yeah, I when I first set up my Stripe account, I don't know what I did, but it wasn't working with my bank, and oh my God, was I panicking. I was like, people are backing I was up to like $5,000 and it couldn't access, so I couldn't get that money. Oh my God, was I freaking out. I'm like, I'm gonna have to, somebody in Africa is making money off of my comic. What are we celebrating today? We're celebrating everything. Celebrating being alive. good mood, right? So I thought we'd do what we normally do when we don't have a guest. We'll bring up Mike's Amazing World of Comics and just talk about comics while we scroll through some of the stuff. If you see anything that you like, call it out and we'll talk about it. But this is January 1980 on the newsstand. So this is pretty much every comic that came out. Not pretty much. This is like 2000 AD. So it's got British comics and American comics. I'm sure it doesn't have anime, manga, and Italian comics, but this is what you saw on spinner racks all over America. I don't know. I love seeing these all together. I remember. I pretty much remember every cover of like Avengers. Did you get this? The Vision blowing stuff up?
No, I don't have that one. Although I can tell you right now, I have the Batman 322 and the DC Comics Presents number 20. We must have got a lot of Whitman stuff back then because it was like in bags from Kmart, right? That's the only thing I can think of, but where those came from.
I remember this Spider-Man meeting Dazzler. Yeah, Disco. Look at all this stuff. This is fun. These Conans, I have this issue, but I didn't collect Conan. I think my brothers bought comics and then gave them to me when they were done. This Doctor Strange. I actually had a subscription to Doctor Strange at this point because Doctor Strange, for whatever reason, was impossible to find in my area. So I subscribed, and I just remember they came like just jammed in like the brown paper for like a grocery bag, and they always came beat up. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait for the subscription to end.
That's so what I was getting the second year of X Factor when it came out. My brother bought me a subscription like that, and it came in the mail. It's like, no way, I'm buying a second edition. I don't care. I'm going to the grocery store and getting another one. I'm not keeping this. I mean, I kept them, but
like I don't want to. Like I call it a condition queen. I'm not a condition queen. Like it doesn't have to be 9.8, but there comes a point where you don't want it crumpled up like a used Kleenex either. I love this Ghost Rider. That was so good. He's summoning the Hellfire bike, and he's going to put Johnny Storm on it. Hey, Michael Bancroft, you want to come in? You want to pop in again? Talk comics?
Wouldn't be born for another 6 months.
I would.
I don't know. You guys got the time warp down there? I don't know if it's like all across America or not. Anyways, they do on Saturdays. They do as if it is this year, and they just play that year music, right? I think it's a syndicated thing, and they were doing 1973 last Saturday. I was thinking, I can remember most of 1973.
Yeah, I remember 1980. I remember. There was that show Fridays, which was on at Friday nights instead of Saturday. It was like the more younger, hipper version of Saturday Night Live. It had Michael Richards, who became Kramer. He started out on that show. Gilbert Gottfried started out on that show, and they would have bands. Like I learned about a lot of bands from that show, like the Pretenders, and Andy Kaufman was on it all the time. I used to love that. So I remember 1980 because I remember that was when John Lennon got shot. And they did a 1980s, the last episode of the year. They talked about everything that happened, and they were like crying, talking about John Lennon. And at the time, John Lennon didn't really mean anything to me. So I was like, "Who's this guy, John Lennon?" He was in the Beatles, but I've since become a big Beatles fan. But in 1980, when John Lennon got shot, it didn't mean anything.
The only thing I can remember from Friday nights in 1980 was the fact that we were just waiting for Dukes of Hazzard to come on, because it was always on Friday night.
Yeah, Dukes of Hazzard was huge. Michael Bancroft says, "I don't know if I have anything intelligent to say about these books." Are you listening to me and RJ? We don't have anything intelligent.
Intelligence is not a requirement here.
Fridays had the Frightened Family. Yeah, Fridays, the Frightened Family. That I remember that. My favorite though was Michael Richards. My father used to call that. He goes, "Oh, John's on TV," and Michael Richards was like a big kid, and he would sit in a big gigantic sandbox, and there was no words. It was just him grunting, picking up army men, going and acting like Godzilla and knocking them over. I used to love that. The other thing they had was the guy, "Take a pill. Take a pill." Like Fridays was a big deal for like 2 or 3 years, and now it's like nobody remembers anything. Love the colors. Yeah, love the colors on those covers. Not a lot of gradients. Yes, this right.
Exactly, primary colors. What you need.
Yeah, look at how much green, yellow, red. And then some blue in, some blue in a once in a while purple, like that Hulk 45. Oh wow. I just noticed this. Look at the color schemes on the UK covers. They're so different than the American covers. I wonder if, because the covers were usually like a British artist. So I wonder if just the British have a different sensibility than the Americans. And then look at how like hokey everything is. And then you see Jonah Hex, and
so I was looking at the Jonah Hex.
And it's like Jonah Hex is just like, "A bunch of Indians killed my family. Now I got to murder everybody." And then you go to the Hulk, and it's just like, Hulk is upset because he dropped his ice cream cone. Jonah Hex. It's amazing how adult it is in the best sense of the world, not like the pornographic sense of the world. I'm really enjoying the Jonah Hexes. Fridays had Devo on a couple times. Yep, I learned so many good bands from Fridays. Devo, Pretenders, Elvis Costello. They were the younger, hipper one, and I don't know why it's like forgotten about. They also had the Jamaican guy, like Do you smoke it? Yeah, 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 yeah. It's ganja. Like they had like all the catchphrases that we were all saying as a kid. I didn't know what ganja was, but everybody was laughing. So you know, yeah. Oh, look at Mad Magazine. I remember. I could look at a Mad Magazine and I'm like, yep, I remember having that comic. Did Legion of Superheroes? Yeah, this is right when it was. This is Jim Shooter era. So this is like right when it was a. Was Jim Shooter? He was still writing the Legion at this point. Yeah. Look at
I do believe so.
This Marvel Super Action with the Vision on it. I mean, this is a reprint of Avengers 57, but I still think that's one of the greatest covers of all time. That Vision just, with his hand exposed. How could you not want to pick up that comic? So good. But look at all these reprints. We had Marvel Super Action, which reprinted the Avengers. Marvel Tales, which reprinted Spider-Man.
Yep, own that.
Marvel's Greatest Comic, which reprinted the Fantastic Four. Because for the most of us, there were comic book stores, but for the most of us, we didn't live near comic book stores. Like Rampaging. Did you ever get these Rampaging Hulk magazines?
I have a couple, but it was just buying them from stores afterwards. Never from the newsstand or anything.
Yeah. I have them now. Like you said, I don't know where it happened. I must have, because at one point I was going crazy bidding on eBay. So I must have bid, because I have like a whole bunch of Marvel magazines, but I never bought them. I wasn't allowed to buy them. You see, the Rook, this I'm actually putting in an order for Rook #1. I order comics and then I just let the list get to a certain amount. So I don't want to spend $12 on shipping for $20 worth of comics, so I wait until I get to like $100 worth of back issues before I pull the trigger.
Now, I should say this. I'm sure you remember it too, John. For anybody who doesn't know the 1980s, even the stuff like the Rampaging Hulk and stuff like that, they would be on the top shelf of a book rack, right? Right. Like they would usually have in a store the magazines, and they would have two shelves and then a top shelf, and the top shelf had the things that kids were not allowed to see, right. Kids were not allowed to touch, and if you were you or me at that point, we couldn't reach that far anyways.
Yeah, the top shelf, I'm not even joking, they would have Tomb of Dracula next to the Hustler magazines, around by me. So it's like my mother was like, you can't get those. It was literally that the third shelf you stay away from. And I understood that, but sometimes my mom would go to the supermarket and I would go to the cigar store next to the supermarket. And this guy, I don't know, he was just sitting there reading his newspaper. So like the little kids would come in and I'm like, oh, I'm going to look at this, Little Lulu, and this Hustler, and, because this was before the internet, guys. If you wanted to see a naked chick, you had to sneak into an Optimo and look at a Hustler for a second or two. So, Michael Bancroft, how you doing?
Yo, what's up, boys?
So, how did you? So, in Australia, did they have the Hustlers next to these magazines on the shelves? And what did Australians do to get their kicks back in 1980?
I reckon they still do have some.
Oh, you weren't born yet. Oh, geez, you youngin.
Well, not in the 80s, but I reckon they still have like the odd. X-rated magazine at a service station. You call it a gas station. But in the 80s, for me, the only place you could see it was sort of if you had like a wooded area, there would always be a spot where the teenagers would leave their porn.
Oh,
go out and have a look.
It's funny that you said that, because I was just talking about that with my wife just like a couple of days ago, that like it was like legendary. It was like an American rite of passage. I guess it's in Australia, but you'd be in the woods and you'd find a hole full of dirty porn. Like when I say dirty porn, I'm like, it was covered in mud, it was rained on, and you loved it because that was the only filth that we had back then. It was a rite of passage.
Yeah, it was like, for us, it was kind of like being inside a video game, because there was this wooded area was just in the middle of suburbia. It hadn't been developed yet. And there was only one path in and one path out, and it was quite thin. So you would ride your bike in pell-mell, and you just have to go as fast as you can through this really thin track. because if the teenagers were in there, there's no way you could get close. So, you know, if you saw them, you had to just keep on riding.
Yep.
Otherwise, you had to, you know, stop where you needed to stop and then get in and have a look and get out.
Yeah, the teenagers, it was like the orcs were about to attack. You know, like,
Yeah. Teenagers are dangerous in the 80s. Now they're like weak.
Yeah, back then it was just like, you know, they're all there smoking their cigarettes and you know, what are you
They
kids
had
doing?
knives and stuff. I guess they probably have knives in London now, but you know, a bit different.
Beat you up? Yeah. We're just trying to see a naked lady. You know, that's it.
So I kind of derailed the
It's fine.
comic book talk.
Some service stations stuck back in time in Australia. Yeah, Australia is mostly empty of people, right?
I mean, yeah, if you take the whole land into consideration, yes.
Yeah,
Doesn't feel that empty to me though.
Well, yeah, you live in a city, yeah, but like the continent of Australia, the whole middle is like a desert, right? Only Priscilla,
Yeah.
Queen of the Desert.
I think it's like 95% of it is empty.
Yeah,
Some crazy number.
there you go, RJ. You could go even more off the grid.
I'm looking at
Don't
these
worry,
covers.
they'll find a way to,
We
like,
were
catch
talking about primary colors earlier, Michael, and as I'm looking at these covers, I just see Michael Bancroft green everywhere now.
Yeah, because it prints amazingly. So you know.
Oh wow, look at this. This Avengers 195. That's the first appearance of Taskmaster. Oh, I wonder if that's
Oh yeah, I was just looking at that. My brother hauled it out.
Look at this Battlestar.
Oh, I have that. I have Amazing Spider-Man 204. There you go. Look at that.
Yeah, I think that's the second appearance of Black Cat. No, yeah, her first appearance was 194, I think.
I have I just have I just grabbed whatever random amazings I could get that were affordable back in the day.
Now, do your comics, are they the same edition as American comics, or they're
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at this first, you know, is well, I guess it was the last one, but it was UK editions. But
Yeah, they used to do Australian reprints way back in the day. I have a whole selection of a Superman and Superboy reprints from the 40s. They're great. So it's like proper golden age era stuff. You know, in a weird format and everything. I don't know if they're worth anything, but I love them. They're great.
That's like these Whitman here. Like I said, John, I think we bought a lot of Whitman. My parents bought a lot of Whitman for us. But we have the Battle of the Planets, that one right there, and the Buck Rogers on the next. They're both Whitman on the next line. You know, I had these since I was a kid. You can never tell if they're reprints or not. But anyways, because Battle of the Planets is what? I can't even remember. Gotchaman.
Yeah, it's an American version of Gotchaman. You know, spliced in with something else. You know. But I loved it as a kid. That was like my first, you know, as we used to call it, Japanimation back then. I guess that's not a politically correct term anymore, but that's what it was called back then. Either one of you guys have this Battlestar Galactica? This was some of Walt Simonson's.
Walter Simonson's run, yeah.
Yeah, this is gorgeous. And I think he said he ended up writing the last couple of issues because they didn't have a writer and he was already the artist. They're like, if nobody writes this, you're out of work. So he's like, all right.
Well, you know, being the artist was kind of like being the writer anyway. You're kind of telling the story and then you know,
Marvel,
they slap some dialogue over the top later.
Yeah. So those Australian reprints, did they have like local Australian artists doing the covers? Because Britain.
No. It was funny. They were all mixed up. So the earliest one I've got, it says Superman number 10, but I think it was like Superman number, 20 or something like that in American. So it's kind of like a novelty thing, I guess. So it's just the same thing, but just different. I guess they just printed whatever they wanted. They had some kind of license deal. But it's all the same content.
Fabrizio, I sent you the link if you want to pop in too. You see this epic illustrated number 1? This is the first and only Frazetta work by Marvel Frazetta. I can't say that correctly. This is the only work that Frank Frazetta did for Marvel. This Roman Lost Legion. did either one of you guys get Epic Illustrated?
No, just if it's not Spider-Man from like previous to 1994, I didn't get it. So
I started getting it last year. It is really, really good.
Yeah, I have some Epic now. My brother buys a lot of it off eBay.
Yeah, I didn't get it at the time. Again, this was next to the, Jugs and Gallery and Hustler and all that stuff that
looks good though.
Oh, it's amazing. It really is good. It really is good. Yeah, I have a couple. I wound up with an Aussie reprint of Vampirella. I don't have any Vampirella comics. I just drives me nuts that she's a vampire from another planet. It's like, dude, commit to the bit. Either you're an alien or you're a vampire. You can't be an alien vampire. That's like I'm a robot from the past, or
Do you remember Death Swan, John? Yeah, it was like a crowdfunded book from 2018. Took 5 years to come out.
No,
but it was epic. The guy Carlo Rowe, who made it, redrew it like 3 times. That's why it took. Every time he got to the end of the book, his art just got so much better. He'd go back and redraw it again. But it was about space vampires.
What was the name?
Death Swan, and it is still to this day one of the best crowdfunded books I've ever received. Even though I had to wait.
Is there any place we could get it? Like, if you find a link for it, send me a link to it. I'd like to check it out.
Yeah, I don't know. He's because he took so long to put it out. I reckon he lost all the money over the years.
Yeah,
he's sort of been fulfilling it on his own dime, I guess, when he can. So I doubt you can get it anywhere.
Yeah, that's a shame. I don't want to say anything bad because I never knew it existed, but it's a shame. Look at this: the Spider-Man and werewolf fighting the Tatterdemalion. I don't know why, but I've always been. Do you guys ever have like a really obscure character that you champion? Like I love the Absorbing Man, and I get jealous when other people talk about the Absorbing Man. I'm like, no, that's mine. You can't talk.
I like Night Watch because he's such a blatant ripoff. Do you remember Night Watch?
Yeah, Night Watch. That
it was like, Marvel lost Todd McFarlane and he went off and did Spawn and it blew up and became the hottest big thing. So Marvel, in typical corporate styles, like, oh, we're going to do our own Spawn, and it was so lame and it was so derivative and just.
Is it Night Mask? Or is Night?
No. I don't even know. I've got one issue of it. I don't even know if they've made any more.
I gotta look that up. I'm sure that it's RJ, do you have any obscure characters that you would just like? You don't let your brothers know about because that's your character.
I really like Quasar. I think I've said that a couple of times. Not a lot of people like Quasar.
It's funny because Quasar has been on my Sunday comics. I'm doing the Project Pegasus, and Quasar is one of the people that pop up in it. And a lot of people say, like, what's so special about this guy? And I'm like, the thing about Quasar is he's a defender. He's not an aggressor. Like I at least for the 80s and the 90s, they portrayed him as a guy who's reluctant to fight, but he wants to protect people. Like it was kind of like like Superman is a defender, not an aggressor, whereas obviously the Punisher is an aggressor rather than a defender. But and I would even say like Batman is kind of an aggressor rather than a defender. But I really like that about Quasar. Like everybody talks about, when he was like chained up and they were whipping him for information and he wouldn't give up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Remind me of Quasar's deal, because all of that is a bit the whole cosmic thing is all a bit hazy for me.
So if I remember correctly, in order for Captain Marvel to come into this universe, you had, what's his name, the guy from Incredible Hulk, Rick Jones. He had these magic armbands and he would have to cling them together, and then he would bodily change from the dimension into Captain Marvel. So after Captain Marvel died, those armbands still existed and they had power of their own, and Quasar basically became like I would almost say a Green Lantern for
he was Marvel's Green Lantern.
So he used those armbands. He didn't have as much power as Captain Marvel did, but he had different kinds of power and he could use them in various different ways, and basically defender of Earth.
Right.
I remember him. But you know, the whole cosmic pantheon is so vast, and you know, it's got full of like strange stuff. There's so many people to kind of keep track of in that world.
Speaking like Thing and Warlock, you know, but this character Tatterdemillion, I this is like a character that I don't know why I just took a liking to him. He's basically a homeless guy in Manhattan, but he's like some sort of like I don't like they don't. Is he like a demon or is he just like a mutant or something? But you know, a tatterdemalion just means a raggedy person. You know, it's an old-fashioned word for a person with like raggedy clothes. I don't know. I just found that to be like it's just an interesting character.
1980, 1981 was the we'll say the old version of the Chuds. Chuds used to be cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers in New York City, and it's because of homeless people who were living in the sewers.
They're there. We pay them not to piss on the equipment that we have to leave overnight in the base, you know, in the tunnels.
You mean, are you talking about real homeless people?
Yeah.
They made characters out of them in comics?
Yeah, there was always rumors of like albino alligators, and I forget who, but people wrote like stories of like homeless people that would come out at night and kidnap people and eat them. You know, so
that's where the Morlocks came from in early 1980s X-Men.
Right. You know, those urban legends, you know, the homeless people.
I like the John Wick Homeless Network. I thought that was
I think that's great. But there was a movie called Chuds, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers. You know, and that just cemented it. Like the Simpsons make jokes about it, but there are colonies of homeless people that live in the tunnels. They don't get too hot, they don't get too cold. And then when guys like us would sit, you know, workers go down in the ground to install stuff and fix power lines, you got to bring in heavy equipment and you chain it up and you leave it down there and you come back the next day and it's all covered with pee. So you're like, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to. So you bribe the Chuds. Here's $20, guys. You know, okay, that's what they do. They just shake you down. You know, the foreman's got to go and give them all $20, and they don't pee on your equipment. It's the best $20 that foreman ever spent.
Yeah, that sounds like
New York.
Yep. New York is disgusting, ladies and gentlemen. Do not visit New York. It is absolutely disgusting. I almost got into another fist fight on the subway today. Guy gets on the subway, just starts yelling and screaming in people's faces, and I'm just like, got to take the headphones off. I got to get into a fight. It's 4:30 in the morning, and luckily he got off on the next stop before he made it to me. I always liked Firefox before I got to the musical theater in the 2000s. Everybody, hey Yang, you want to come in, Yang? You want to come in, talk with us? I'll send you a link. Yeah, Yang is awesome too. So
now, what's ROM? I've seen ROM around a lot. What's ROM?
ROM, the Space Knight.
Yeah,
it was basically a toy that came out in 1979, and Marvel basically decided to make an entire comic book around it in order to sell the toy. And so they created this entire separate part of the Marvel universe where these Space Knights defend against what are basically Skrulls, because they can shapeshift, but they also have magical powers.
Right. It has no right being as good as it is.
Oh, exactly. And they had Steve Ditko even did, when it was winding down, they had Steve Ditko do it.
It was so good.
Wow.
I think it started with Sal Buscema and Bill Mantlo.
Yeah.
And when I say I recently reread it, I mean within the past 10 years, it holds up. They're coming out with the ROM Omnibus, and I recommend it to anybody. It is, they made a whole bunch of toys, IP comics around this time. Like right now, look at this. You got the Shogun Warriors, you got ROM, you had the Micronauts, Star Wars, you know, Star Trek, but they were all really good. It's unbelievable how good the Micronauts were, and it's unbelievable how good ROM was. Now, you know, and they lost, I think it was Mattel or Hasbro, I forget the toy company, but they lost the licensing, so like they didn't reference the ROM. They would just say the Space Knight whenever they referenced ROM, you know, and now they got, now they got it back and they're making an omnibus. I recommend it if you could find it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I always tried to fill up, like I'm missing like 2 or 3. I don't want to buy omnibuses, but I always go, when I go to a new comic shop, I always look for those 2 or 3 ROM.
Yeah, you could get them for like $1 a piece. You know,
I like the hunt.
yeah, every dollar bin's got ROMs in it, you know, or Micronauts, you know, and they're so good.
The Buscema did excellent. I mean, I was always used to him doing Conan, but when he actually moved over to a current day book, which was ROM at that time, he's just the angry look in everybody's face that he always put on everybody's face. It just gave the book character. I don't know what else to call it.
It's funny that you said that, because we got Marcus Kellegrew in the chat. I sent him a script for my character, the Public Eye, and he fights some thugs. And the description in the script was Sal Buscema thugs attack the Public Eye. You know, I knew Marcus would know exactly what I'm talking about. And
I once made a T-shirt print made up almost entirely of old Buscema thugs. It was great.
Oh.
They were so well drawn. It was amazing.
Look at this Tales to Astonish. This is a reprint of old Submariners, but just look at that cover. Submariner fighting the tiger shark. Oh my God. I love that. That was one of the comics. I didn't have now I have the original, but I had this reprint. I reread that to the point I could almost dictate that comic to you. So good. So you know what's not good though? Yang Zhao. He's better than good. He's the best.
Evening.
He doesn't look like his avatar.
Yeah, the first time I was on Yang's
Pretty
channel,
ugly. Yeah.
it's not what I expected.
False advertising.
Oh, Michael,
Wait, what?
RJ, do you know Yang? I just assume everybody knows each other.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay,
I have
cool.
never met Yang. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great.
Yeah. You talk to Yang about Dungeons and Dragons and everything, RJ. He knows as much as Dungeons and Dragons as I know comics. Look at this Warlord.
That's what I was just looking at.
Look
They
at
always
that.
have beautiful covers.
Wow.
And this. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep talking.
No. Finish your thought. I got another question.
I was gonna say that Mike Rell, he did a comic after Warlord. He did John Sable, and John Sable, I think it would cause an outrage if it came out today, because John Sable was a trophy hunter, so he's in Africa killing zebras and giraffes. He's out womanizing, and then he's like a killer. You know, granted, he's a killer that like only kills bad guys and everything. And then in the letters page was Mike Rell talking about guns. And it's just like, who's the target audience of this? Men. Toxic Masculinity should have been the name of that comic. And they don't make anything like it anymore.
Yeah, it was First Comics, wasn't it?
Yes, that was First Comics. What were you going to say, Michael? You said you had a question?
Has anyone here watched that Matt video on the Duck Man? All the Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge books and everything.
Oh, the good duck artist?
Yeah. That was one of the best comic book videos I've ever seen on YouTube. It's such a great kind of uplifting story. It's well worth a watch. And everyone should definitely subscribe to that guy's channel, Matt. It's Matt with like
5 or 6 T's.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
that.
he makes a video every once in a blue moon, but they are like I'm not even joking, like 150,000 views per video.
Yeah, because the quality of his videos are what television should be, but isn't. If you watch like actual television now, the TV show, like that sort of like little kind of informational sort of, they're terrible. But his videos are like the premier top professional level made video, and it's all about the history of comic books and like certain creators. And he's done Todd McFarlane, he's done Rob Liefeld, he's done a whole bunch of people that otherwise I would never have known of if not for him. And now I'm just kind of in awe of.
Yeah, he did the Wendy Peeney and you know he's so good. You know, I don't know if it's one guy or if it's a studio.
I think it's just one guy, but he just puts a lot of research into it. He says at the end of his video, you know, special thanks to, and he lists up a whole bunch of people who helped him with the research and everything. A lot of times he's just friggin' interviewing them, like how he interviewed Jeff Smith, and that was friggin' an amazing video as well. Anyway, that just reminded me of seeing the Donald Duck book though.
I
Because
wonder-
my first ever comic book that I ever read, I would have been 6 or 7 years old. We were catching the train up to Sydney, and we were at the train station, and there was just a bin in the middle of the train station of just comic books thrown in there like garbage, not stacked, not just like on a pile. And I think they were like 20 cents each or something. And I grabbed Hanna-Barbera Flintstones with the Great Gazoo, and I still have it. And both my kids have read it, and they love it. It's from 1960 something, 3 or something.
You just
Right.
reminded me of a story of my grandmother. When she finally got Alzheimer's, it didn't make a difference because she was kind of daffy from day one. So she would go off on walks, and then my mother would be like, "Go find Nana," and I'd have to walk around the neighborhood, and she's talking to strangers or whatever. So she's out for a walk one day, and she's home, and she goes, "Oh, John, I went for a walk the other day, and I saw a big stack of comic books all tied up for the garbage, and I was gonna come and get you, but then I decided that they were only worth 10 cents."
What, do you reckon it was real?
That's just it, though. I was like, "Nana, where is it?" And she's like, and then I realized this may have never happened. It may have happened yesterday. It may have happened 6 months ago.
They said 10 cents on all the covers, so I thought, they're not worth anything.
Yeah, they're only worth 10 cents. I'm like, "Oh my god, that!" And sometimes in the middle of the night, I wake up in the middle of the night, like that could have been that could have been my ticket out.
Because that does happen. That does happen. They find, some old geezer kicks the bucket, and they find this treasure trove in his attic.
Well, it's funny you say that because I've been going to a lot of estate sales recently, and like occasionally they'll have boxes, but they're all priced out. Like some lady was arguing with me that some Jughead comic from 1963 was worth $50, and I was like, "Who's going to pay $50 for that?" And she had like 3 long boxes that apparently she takes to all the estate sales that she goes to, and she just like can't get rid of this stuff.
Right. I had an apprentice. His grandfather died, and he got a copy of Justice League #1. And I was like, "I'll buy that off you. I'll make an offer." And I looked up the price, and I gave him what I considered to be a fair price. And his father was like, "That guy's a shyster. That comic is worth $16,000. So he was like, we stopped talking over this. And I'm like, "Listen, it's not worth $16,000. I think I offered him $1,000 for it." And I'm like, "That is like a 9.8 CGC rated, comic book.
Yeah.
A comic that's, I don't know what the quality is. I don't know if it's beat up. You took a picture with your cell phone and sent it to me, and I gave you I went to mycomicshop.com and looked at it, and I averaged out all the prices. I said, "Good luck getting $16,000 for it." I said, "But you gotta mail that." I said, "You gotta mail that down to Florida. They grade it. 6 months later, you get it back. You're gonna pay a couple $100, but you didn't do any of that." And because he looked Justice League and he Googled it and he saw a 9.8 and it was 16,000.
Yeah. That reminds me of a TV show where it just follows a bunch of people who do essentially that, like treasure hunt various things. And there's a comic book shop, and they're listening on the radio. And this guy's like, "I got tables full of comics. Come down, check them out." And the guy knew that they had some good comics there, and he sort of knew they were valuable. And he was just kind of haggling based on what he kind of guessed. Anyway, the comic book shop went down there, and they were like, "I'll give you 20 grand cash right now for the entire collection." And the guy's like, "Oh, I don't know." And he's like, "Look, I'll tell you straight up, there's probably about 50 grand worth of comics here, but how are you going to sell that individually to random people out of your garage?
Yeah.
I'll give you 20 grand cash right now." And he pulled it out. This is like, "Yeah, all right, that's a good deal."
I told you my Carbo. I don't know. He used to have ads in the comic. He showed up at I was thinking about buying a house years ago. I buy comics in a storage unit, so I went online, messaged him, and he shows up with a shoebox with 40,000 cash. And I was like, "What are the odds that the amount of money you just happened to bring is what you've valued by?" I was like, "Get out of here." I was like insulted. I was like, 40,000 for my collection? Get out of here. I got 4 boxes out of 150 that are worth 40,000. Get out of here. And I swear, I was tempted because it was around the block from where my brother lived. My brother's a big biker guy, and I was like, James, there's a guy in a white dot, the shoebox. I'm going to McDonald's. I'm just letting you know this information. But I wanted to talk about this X-Men 133. This is, guys, ladies and gentlemen, take my word for it. When X-Men 132 came out, Wolverine was a minor character. He was he was there to be the foil for Cyclops. 133 came out. This is what his breakout comic.
Absolutely.
That last panel in 132 where Wolverine fights alone. And then this issue, I don't care how they retconned it, Wolverine killed everybody in the Hellfire Club. And I'm not shedding a tear because the Hellfire Club were bad people. They were the Epstein Island people of Marvel at the time. And seeing people go gaga over Emma Frost these days, she can't reform. I don't care. If Jeffrey Epstein did a heel turn and says, I'm a good guy now, F you, Jeff. You know what I mean? Like, there's some crimes that you don't.
Yeah, once you cross, there's no coming back.
So I this was it. This was when this one particular comic turned Wolverine into like a C-list character into, I guess, Marvel's most popular character right now. Good question, Wistmore. Are older millennials the less comic book collector generation? What do you guys think?
I think so, yeah.
I'm an older millennial or young Gen Xer, depending on which one you look at it. So maybe, yeah. I mean, I grew up collecting, but yeah, the kind of kids that I was friends with who are 10 years younger than me, 15 years younger than me. Yeah, they're not into comics at all in any way.
Especially not collecting. Maybe they'll buy like a trade paperback or an omnibus or something.
Yeah.
Like
all my friends, just random friends. I have friends that we go skating with, have beers with. They all collected comics to various degrees. Like, I just had a random friend. I was like, "Oh, I saw you had Artsy Bear on your channel. I have a stack of old Artsy Bear comics." And I was like, "I didn't even know you read comics," but that was just the age, if you're of that
everybody,
age.
Yeah, I Generation Z at least. I can't speak. I'm fully Generation Z. We all got comics. Now, when I say got comics, you picked them up. But I collected them. I love collecting. I love putting them in alphabetical order. I love bagging and boarding them. I love going to my back room and taking out a box and remembering them. But not everybody's as crazy as me. But everybody got comics, and they'll buy them. They read them. They gave them to their friend. They left them where they read them and forgot about them because they were disposable. Even at the time, they were cheap. Even at the time of a 25-cent comic, everybody had a quarter in their pocket. It wasn't like, I don't know, like a $6 comic in a comic book store. You're really like looking, do I want this? Do I want this? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Back then, you just like
they were $1.10 or $1.25 when I started, but I could save up to get a bunch over a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to like pick and choose. But yeah, if not these days, if I go into a comic shop, a random issue is about $12-13.
Wow.
So I'm like, no kid is ever spending $13 on a floppy comic to kind of get into reading these things once a month. It's just not happening.
Right. And the beautiful part was they were right there in the supermarket. So it's like, my mom went in to get some eggs and milk and cheese and whatever. And then like, Mark, she gave me the change, and then I bought a comic. I don't have a kid, but hey, Dad, out of the whim, can you give me like $8.50 for a comic book? I'm gonna be like, what are you buying?
Well, my kids do read sequential storytelling. It's just not floppy comics. They read books. They read European books. They read, actual series, but they don't just buy random, floppy comics. They were just never interested at all.
RJ, you're going to go over to your channel too. So I'm going to follow RJ over to, he does his Wednesday night show at 9:30. I'll stay up for a little later. But what was the last time we got 4 people? Last question. What was the last time any of us stepped foot in a local comic book store?
Ooh.
2 years ago.
Yep.
2 years.
Yeah, I got a really great one. Really cool couple. Really nice, very clean, art focused. I'm not that interested in what you get at comic book shops anymore. Which is the more mainstream stuff. So that's the only reason I don't go in there anymore.
RJ, when was the last time you went to a
Again, it's the double edge to that question, because the last time I regularly go in and to try to pick up bags so I can send my comics, but I don't actually go in for the comics. Last time would probably be 2023. Yeah.
Wow. Yang, what about you?
It was a few months ago. There's one near the vet, and I went over there while I was waiting for them to try to do stuff to my cat. And I have to say, the shop of itself is actually pretty good. They give you like some sort of newsletter that's like previews of things coming out. So that was good. They had an independent shelf, even though it was like the independents that you really wouldn't want to read. And they at least tried. They had employee recommendations, but they were all like Tom King books. And, I've been meaning to go over there to get Vatican City, but otherwise, there's really nothing I'm that interested in.
It's funny because I was going to say it's been months, but then I just realized that Billy Tucci asked me to meet him at the local comic book store to us, and we hung out at Free Comic Book Day. And I bought a bunch of comics, and I just was like talking to the owner, and he said it's not as bad as it was. Things are picking up, so that's good. It's not.
I did go to the last Free Comic Book Day, but it wasn't in an actual comic book shop. It was basically a Funko Pop shop that had comics.
Yeah.
I mean, from just glancing around, first of all, the indie scene is so much better now in terms of if you count in Ghost Machine and Mad Cave and a whole bunch of other more larger small publishers, and Image as well. Are putting out some really good stuff. But, a lot of people are saying even the corporate studios are actually starting to put out some good stuff again. I'm not interested, but, that's got to be a good sign.
Yeah.
Overall for the health of the scene.
I believe that we've turned a corner, and it's, I think a course correction. We are in the midst of a course correction. I don't think we'll ever recapture the glory days, but I think unfortunately, a lot of the movies were already made. I think that's why the Fantastic Four is going through reshoots right now. Like, I think we've been losing so much money, we can't make this woke stuff anymore. I'm hoping that they're going to remove some of the woke stuff in the Fantastic Four, but I've been hearing like DC is really firing on all cylinders lately.
Yep. If you're listening to Wes over Thinking Critical, DC is actually outselling Marvel for the first time in decades.
Wow. Yeah, good. And it's funny because when you said indies and said Image, I don't consider Image indie anymore. Like they're, to me, they got movies made. Like they're mainstream, like Dark Horse.
Yeah, they walk the line. It's difficult because a lot of them are still sort of new properties and kind of creator owned. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah. I'm
not really small press.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get upset about that, but
But
Caleb Hammer. This is Marvel trying to bring back the Western over here with Caleb Hammer. That's so manly.
It's nice to hear that Marvel and DC are finally getting better content. The problem is you still have the other two major deficits in comic selling in the US. One is distribution. Like you're not going to go to a comic store unless you like comics. So
right.
What kids are going to start going there to buy books is number one. And number two is the price. Comics worked great when they were impulse buys.
Right.
When you had disposable income, you could do it. When you were in the supermarket checkout and your mom's like, okay, here, shut up for 3 minutes while I pay the man.
Yeah.
But at $6, $7 a book, man, that's expensive.
Absolutely. It's funny because I keep mentioning I'm a construction worker. I work with normies, guys that are grandfathers, guys that are looking at retiring, and they all get excited when they find out that I'm making a comic, and I got a card printed with the QR code so they could scan it, go right to the website, and they're like, wow, but they think about buying my comic for 2 or 3 weeks before they buy it.
Mhm.
And they know, and they know me because like, it's not a quarter anymore. Even $10 for a comic book is like, do I really want, But here's another kicker. Out of the 6 guys who are into comics that I work with, they all know Ripperverse comics. For some reason, that's transgendering. How's that for you? It's trans, whatever. It's getting out there. Yeah,
Transcending.
it's transcending. Yes, it's trans. They know this. So I had to be a pest and like, what about Comicsgate? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, that says
Yeah, dude, getting outside of your social media bubble that and everyone is in some kind of bubble,
right?
And getting outside of it and reaching new eyeballs, I mean, that's like the hardest thing to do, and almost everyone struggles with it.
Right? Yeah. I just heard somebody say this today, and I forget who. But making comics is fun. Marketing comics is torture. I kind of agree with that. I mean, I like to talk to people, but like, I'll talk to people, and I'm like, is this where I mention my comic? Like, am I being impolite?
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, people aren't really thinking about comics, and they're not necessarily fans of comics, but people are always fans of good stories. When The Walking Dead broke out, I was just like, oh, it's a good story. People are fans of that, So like, it wasn't like, oh, I love The Walking Dead. That didn't mean they loved comics.
Right.
It just meant they loved The Walking Dead.
Right.
So like, that is where I think, that's the hardest thing to do.
It's funny because I said that's one of the comics that they brought up. Like, yeah, I haven't bought comics in years, or I'm not interested. But I got The Walking Dead because I like the TV show, And if a TV show could get people to go to a comic store and buy comics, why can't these Marvel and DC movies do the same thing?
Well, I would read the comic, if I'd seen the show, and I haven't read Walking Dead, but I would read the comic because I'd want to see, okay, it's going to expand on what I've seen. I'm going to maybe see a little bit of different. I'm going to see more stuff. Whereas I don't think you're going to see that. You're like, oh, I watched Endgame. There's no comic you can go to sort of expand on that. It's sort of, they exist in completely different universes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if say like any adaptation of a manga or anything like that, oh yeah, you can go watch the anime and it'll either sort of exist in the same universe, but it'll expand on it. Just like you watch Game of Thrones, you want to read the novels, all right, you get more of an in-depth understanding of the characters and what happened. That's not the same with comics and movies. There's no crossover there. It's like, oh, this character has the same name and roughly the same sort of look almost, but it's a completely different character, story, universe, everything. So it's like,
comics do have a hard barrier to entry. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they I do think they should bring back the Jim Shooter. Every issue is somebody's first issue. It's tough. It's tough. RJ, do you want to split yet?
Yeah, I got to run. My stream should be starting right now, so I got to take off. Nice to talk to you again, Michael, and nice to meet you, Yang.
Good to meet you.
See you, man.
And I'll shut down here because it's 1:05. And RJ, if you want me to come on, I'll stay up for a little bit. So go over to the Fourth Age on YouTube, and RJ will, as low as we get, RJ will go high. He's with polar opposites. He's Felix to my Oscar.
A scholar and a gentleman.
Yes, absolutely a scholar. I listen to RJ's Saturday lectures, and they give you so much to think about. Like, I really do. Like, I have to sit by myself and listen to them uninterrupted because they're that highfalutin, and I'm a dummy, so it needs to penetrate my noggin. But anything you guys want to say before we go?
Yep, I'll be live in 20 minutes as well doing the art share, and also sign up to my next book at thelucentcomic.com.
There you go. And Yang, anything you want to say?
Well, I'll be doing the Nerd Council of Doom this weekend. We'll be talking about surprisingly a good Star Wars show, and/or we'll be talking about the Great Underground Online Gaming Convention, and possibly upcoming gaming trip to Japan.
Oh wow, cool! I would love to go to Japan.
Well, you'll have your chance.
Yeah. Okay. But thanks a lot, everybody. If you're still interested, go over to the Fourth Age, and if RJ sends me the link, I'll pop up over there. Wednesday's my late night. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks a lot. It's good seeing you guys. Thanks for popping in.
Yeah, thanks for
Bye-bye.
having me.
See ya.
All the time. You guys are a pleasure.